Hello everyone! Today, over this footage of Barony, I wanted to talk about something. In particular, what I wanted to talk about was soldiers in the past. And by the past, I mean anything up to incredibly recent times. So, how to put it? Oh yeah. I'm just going to be blunt. Soldiers in the past would loot stuff all the time. And I don't just mean one particular group of them would do this. Pretty much all soldiers of most countries in most periods of history looted stuff. Not just in war either, but just randomly passing by. Even looting their own side. Now, you might ask a few things in response to this. So, first off, how recent are we talking here? Are we talking 1600s? No, we're talking 1800s. As late as the American Civil War, you had soldiers looting stuff. And I'm not talking about Sherman's March to the Sea, where Sherman deliberately got rid of his supply lines and had his army live off the land. I'm talking about soldiers in both the Union and the Confederacy looting stuff from their own side. If you were a civilian and a Union or Confederate force came through, you genuinely had to worry about your soldiers looting you. Sorry, stealing your stuff, I mean, not just looting you. That's a silly thing to say. I mean, if you were black and Confederate soldiers came by, you really would have to worry about them looting you, so, I mean, it's not entirely wrong. But the main point of what I'm getting at is that soldiers, of both the Union and the Confederacy, even if you were someone that would normally be of a group they like, or at least be on the side of just a random civilian, and they were passing by your land, there was a good chance they were going to steal stuff from you. This, same thing with soldiers in ancient Rome. Same thing with, say, the knights of the Middle Ages, but also peasants. Same thing with samurai. Same thing with Mexican revolutionaries. Same thing with pretty much most soldiers throughout the history of humanity. And, it isn't just something that one group of them has a problem with doing. All of them did it, up until incredibly recently. Now then, you might ask, why would they do this? Why would they loot their own side, or why would they loot things in general? Well, there are a few different reasons why soldiers did this stuff. One of it is, in simple terms, greed. A lot of soldiers weren't necessarily paid all that well, and in fact, looting was very common among peasant levies, in many cases more common among them than among knights. For the simple fact that peasants don't get paid as much as knights do. So, because of this, a lot of them felt the need to loot to supplement what little money the king or lord or whoever was giving them. So, that's one reason, a lack of pay, and another reason is just straight up greed. Like I said, even aristocratic soldiers would loot stuff sometimes because more money can help them personally. So, it's not like they were just doing it exclusively if they were poor, though being poor would make them more likely to loot stuff. But it was something that could be done, that, rich soldiers could do too. And of course, if you have mercenaries, you can sure as hell bet they were going to be particularly bad in many cases about looting stuff. Because mercenaries aren't in it for loyalty, aren't in it for loyalty or their country or the good of the kingdom. They became soldiers for money. Their entire motivation is profit-based. So, obviously mercenaries are going to be particularly eager to loot stuff. And oftentimes, the difference between a bandit and a mercenary is whether they currently have an employer. So, there you have it. It's about that part. But what are some other reasons soldiers might loot? Well, if you're talking about mass scales of looting inflicted not just by soldiers but by commanders, well, part of it is because war is expensive. And you do get commanders looting things like temples and other houses, that like other big, important, wealthy places to pay for the war they're fighting, or at least help pay for it. So that's one reason why you might get mass looting. Another possibility is the commander lets their soldiers loot a place as a reward for them. Like, reward them for doing so well, just lets them take a place. Though, keep in mind that sometimes the commanders don't want the soldiers to loot a place, but the soldiers do it anyway. It is entirely possible for a commander to lose control of their army, at least for temporary times, and sometimes permanent. There actually were times when a commander was outright killed by his soldiers for not letting them sack a city. This was particularly a problem in the early Middle Ages. So, you might ask a few other things as well. So, so what are some other reasons? Well, food is a big thing that soldiers would loot, both on orders from their commander and on their own. And, I mean, the reasons why should be fairly obvious. Armies eat a lot of food, and, well, if you have a spear and a bunch of guys backing you up, and the guy you're stealing stuff from doesn't have them, there isn't really going to be much they can do to stop you from just taking the food. So unless they want to risk their life over it, which they might if you loot too much, but if you keep your looting modest, most people aren't going to try to fight back. So, then there's those reasons, and another reason, talking about the looting of various looting, is, well, simple cruelty. There are some people who, when they're given power, whether that be in the form of a weapon or really anything, will start to take their aggression or anything else out on other people. And if you have a soldier who now has a weapon and is surrounded by people who aren't as well armed as them and has people who will back them up, they could end up enforcing their power upon others by stealing from them. And sometimes soldiers are just so hardened by war that they no longer give a crap, especially if there's a particularly bad or disastrous one, and if they're in the middle of enemy territory. But once again, this isn't necessarily a universal reaction. And also, once again, looting could be, like, if you're sacking a city, like, that you just took, you could potentially see looting as kind of your right, or if not that, you just really don't care, especially if we're talking about ancient times. So, yeah, the necromancy. So yeah, like, soldiers would loot stuff a lot. And this was something that they do in their own territory as well as enemy territory throughout most of human history. Like, guys, and I'd like to end this video by just bringing up an example of actually how this was kind of used as propaganda. So, commanders would often have their soldiers steal food. And when they stole the food, they typically wouldn't pay for it. Though exceptions existed, like, for example, sometimes the Romans would pay for the food they stole, but typically not at market price. During the wars between the Byzantines and the Ostrogoths for control over Italy, both sides would just steal food and let their soldiers loot all the time. Especially since, well, these wars happened in the early Middle Ages, and like I mentioned before, commanders would get killed by their own men if they didn't let them loot, or at least they would sometimes. And one of the Ostrogothic kings actually paid for the food that he had his men steal. Like, the food he stole from people, he actually paid for it, and he didn't let his men sack and loot the cities they took, which, as I pointed out before, is a really big risk, as the Roman men might kill him for it. But he used this as propaganda against the Byzantines, basically saying that the Byzantines were just a bunch of thieves compared to him. So, yeah, that's like the main point of this video. Looting, even looting your own side, was very common in historical warfare at one point. Thank you for watching. And also, I think I'm going to leave a link to my Discord in the description, so if you want to join, go ahead. Come aboard. Thank you for watching, everyone, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe.